Hello, everyone. Welcome to our program today. My name is Michelle Massey, and I am the Director of Public Programs at the Museum of Russian Art. Today, we have another one of our virtual tours with the Curator, and we've been thrilled to be able to offer these throughout the last year. You can see actually behind both Masha and I today some aspects of the gallery. So these virtual tours help all of you to be able to connect with the artworks and the exhibitions that are in our galleries. And we also invite you to come view them in person if that's possible for you, if you're local, and if you're feeling safe enough to venture out. It's a very safe, open, wide space, and we invite you to come. We are open 7 days a week. That said, these virtual tours are a great resource for you, whether you're able to attend in person or not. And they are all recorded, today's will be as well, and placed on our website. And I will be sending out the link today, but it's under programming. We have a virtual event archive. So you can listen to these tours and get to know what is in our galleries. In addition, we also have cell phone audio tours available for many of our exhibitions. We're actually installing the mezzanine level audio tour today. So by the end of today, you'll be able to do a lot of touring and listening to further information while you're walking through the galleries. And you will also be able to access that audio tour from home. So you'll be able to see those artworks, call on your phone, and actually type in the work number or the painting number, whatever it may be, and be able to hear about 60 to 90 seconds more information. We're basically just trying to do everything that we can to bring our museum out to you wherever you may be right now. So we're excited for today. We're going to be going through our Fireside Gallery exhibition, Artel Dolls, Soviet Russia, 1920s. And I would like to let you know that you're welcome to ask questions anytime today. You can use your chat function to do that. Simply type it in, and Masha and I will be the only ones to see them. So we'll go through, we'll look at them in real time a little bit, but we'll mostly reserve some time at the end to address some of your questions. So feel free to ask away. We'll go an hour today, so about the last 10 minutes we'll spend on questions and answers. So with that, I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome our Chief Curator to our program. She has been the Chief Curator and Head of Exhibitions and Collections at the Museum of Russian Art for almost 13 years. She has created well over 50 exhibitions at the Museum of Russian Art, and she is beloved. I can't wait for you to meet her if you have not already. Masha, everyone please welcome Masha Zavialova.
Good day, everyone. Today we are presenting our exhibition of Russian ethnic dolls. We call them Artel dolls, and I will explain what it means and where this word comes from. I'm very happy to see 50 people here. I don't see all of you, but I see the numbers are increasing, and I really like the Zoom format for our virtual tours because I am able to actually add some materials, like do some research, add photographs, just expand the depth of the show. And we have a lot of material to cover today. So without further ado, let me start sharing my screen. I would like you to start looking at our exhibition. And let's move to this slide, and we'll start sharing. And now the last step for me to fully share, I'll go full screen. And now I hope you can see my screen with the title of the exhibition, the date, and one of the dolls. So here you see one of the cases with 4 dolls. And let me start talking about them, just giving them some kind of a background and description of what they are. and then we'll go into more in depth into how they came to be here in our museum and generally in the United States. So these dolls are called Stockinette dolls. They are made from, there is wire armature inside. They're stuffed with cotton wool, sometimes straw. And their faces are made of stockinette material, the same kind of fabric that in the early 20th century, people made stockings, or factories or production units made stockings out of. In Russian, we use the French word fil de Perse, and which means Persian thread. In English, it's the stockinette material. So you see these faces, they're actually made of fabric. And the fabric then is, there are several layers of fabric with glued together and then shaped with pressing on the form. So hard, heavily pressed, glued together fabric made of cotton, mostly several layers that create these wonderful faces. These dolls are ethnic dolls, so they're dressed in ethnic costumes from different regions of Russia and actually the former Soviet Union, the republics as well. And these costumes are quite nicely made. These dolls were mostly produced in the 1920s and 30s. And at that time, you know, Russia, the Soviet Union was 10 years into the new revolutionary period, the Soviet period. So people at that time in villages, it was 1920s, before the collectivization and setting up the collective farms across the country, people still wore these costumes. So these artists who created these dolls could actually, you know, just travel to a village and go to an open market in Moscow because these dolls were mostly made in Moscow, and look around and be inspired by these peasant costumes. So here we can see dolls, the female dolls, women of the Ryazan region. Ryazan is a region east of Moscow, and two village boys. These are actually, two and two are identical, but because of the skill with which the faces are made, the facial expressions, the painting, these dolls, when you turn them around, make them face each other or stand by side by side, it seems like that they interact. So the skill of how these dolls were made is really quite striking to me. And here, as part of our exhibition, you can see a small basket with mushrooms. They're not real mushrooms, they just symbolize the love of the Russian folk for mushrooms and hunting for mushrooms and preserving mushrooms and eating mushrooms. They were really a staple back in the villages and for a long time throughout the 20th century. These mushrooms come from the Kim Bolashak collection of ornaments, and they are so well made. I believe these, especially this, the podberezovik here, comes from also the 1920s or 1930s production cooperatives. That's where these dolls come from. And here you can see dolls of the Voronezh region. You see the costumes are different. And these are the dolls from Ukraine and from the Moldovan Republic, which is a small ethnic region, not very small, a sizable ethnic region, actually an autonomous ethnic area called an autonomous republic with the population of the Moldovan people, or Mordva, the Finnish speaking, actually the Finno-Ugric group, which there is a number of, right, in Central Russia along the Volga region. and an assortment of dolls. Here you can see the Belarusian doll, the gypsy, and the Samoyed, or the Sami, the northern tribe, a northern ethnicity. And now let's look into how these dolls came to be, and their history is quite, the story about them is quite intriguing, frankly. And the more I discover, the more I research, the more I discover of the moments that are still quite enigmatic and mysterious to me. For example, these dolls cannot be found in Russia nowadays. It seems that they were made by these artels only for the stores in Moscow that specialized in trade or in selling goods to foreigners for foreign currency. In the 1930s, the ruble was not a convertible currency. It was not a hard currency. And it was illegal to possess foreign currency in the Soviet Union. So these stores were really intended only for foreigners. But also the dolls apparently were sent to international expositions at that time, in the 30s mostly. You see, there is quite a narrow time span of when these dolls were produced. And they began to be produced apparently in the 1920s, soon after the revolution, when the country of Moscow, they mostly come, I believe they come from Moscow. The country was reorganizing its entire production. So right after the revolution, all the factories that were formerly privately owned were nationalized and began to be owned by the state, by the government, by the state, and by proxy by the people. Oh, so it was proclaimed by the Soviet government. And in the 20s, Lenin realized that he was in too much of a hurry to reorganize enormous amounts of industries in the Soviet Union, and he made a step back. So small private businesses were allowed to be, and it was called the new economic policy. In the mid-20s, the private business, small private business was again prohibited, but a lot of cooperatives began to emerge. They were allowed, and they were quite, people were encouraged to work in them. These cooperatives were still controlled by the government, by the central government, the ministries of heavy industry, Ministry of Light Industry, Ministry of Agriculture, but they were cooperatives in the full sense of the word. These were groups of people who worked together, who owned what they had together. This would stop in the 1950s. So the centralization, the government would slowly encroach on people's rights and centralize everything, and deprive people even of the small portions of partial ownership in industries that they had in the 1920s and 30s. But in the 20s and 30s, these artels, as they are called in Russia, that's why we call our exhibition Artel Dolls, and that's how they are called in Russian, actually, Artel Dolls. The American term would be Stockinette Dolls. And so these artels were quite burgeoning, lots of them in Moscow. They produced all kinds of things. Here you can see the building of the organization that was called the All Russian Union of Artists in Production. And this was a cooperative that united artisans and artists who made all kinds of things, including dolls. And so some of the artels, it was like an umbrella organization. There were small artels that were called like Red Toy or Red Army Artel or Everything for the Child. That was small, a couple dozen people that made those dolls. This building is still around in Moscow. And here I found some photographs that I would like you to see. I just would like you to immerse into that atmosphere of how these dolls were made. So you see not a lot of machinery, a lot of hand tools, women working, and also some men, and just working together. Sometimes if it was, if an artel was set up in a village, you can see it's a village log house, a peasant log house, the izba, where these people make some small scale consumer goods. And here you can see the top right. This is probably an artel in a city where they make things. It's hard to say looking at these old photographs what they make, but these might be dolls. So the Artel dolls were still, the Artels were still controlled by the government. The plan was imposed on them. Prices were set by the government. And also the distribution routes and networks were organized by the government bureaucrats. And that's how these dolls came to be sold through stores for foreigners only, and also sent for to participate in international exhibitions in Europe and the United States. And at that time, these dolls actually were part of a bigger project of the Soviet government to make cash, to get some foreign currency, to be able to accomplish huge industrial projects of the Stalinist 1930s. The creation of huge metalworking plants, hydropower stations, machine building plants, and also collectivizing farms and providing tractors to them. And tractors in the 1930s, all the tasks were urgent. Tractor factories were built, but in order for collective farms to function, they needed some machinery before, not waiting until the time Soviet tractor plants began to produce tractors. So the Soviet government needed to buy tractors abroad in America and in England, in the UK. And the Stalinist government began to sell things abroad, whatever went. Of course, the first and foremost, we know about imperial treasures, imperial jewels, imperial furniture, porcelain, icons, imperial era paintings. The paintings from the Hermitage Museum brought a lot of money. A few tractors were bought for after the sale of those Rembrandts and Titians and other great artists. So the Soviet government basically began to capitalize on what the imperial government assembled and collected and treasured for centuries. But also the money, the cash, the foreign currency was so badly needed that everything could go. Everything, whatever was sold and had demand outside the Soviet Union at in Europe and the United States and some other countries would be sold. And some of these were dolls. It's quite a fascinating piece of history to me that you look at some things, like we have a lot of different kind of Russian art here in our museum. You look at one small thing that seems to be just a random or an independent individual artwork or a piece of folk art. And all of a sudden it begins to tie into that bigger picture and connect to other artworks from the same period without the distinction of, you know, high art or the expensive art or the art for the elites, elite art and folk art produced by these people that we see in these photographs. So these Stockinette dolls, these Artel dolls and crown jewels, you know, they were probably sent abroad in the same car, on the same truckload of things, and served the same purpose at that time. So what is the connection between these dolls here that turned out to be here in the United States and those early Soviet artels? The connection was the company that was called Curator Dolls, Independence, Missouri. This company is probably, there was some other companies and traders that sold these dolls, but we are not aware of them. Probably they sold a few. Most of the Artel dolls, I would say, I don't know, 97% came from the Soviet Union, the 1930s, to this country, to the United States through Curator Dolls. So Curator Dolls was set up by a husband and wife team. The husband was a public relations person. The wife was an artist and quilt designer. So the business was selling quilts or creating designs for in quilting, I would say. But then the depression happens, late 1920s, and the company, the Kimport, begins to experience difficulties. And they begin to search for new things to do, this enterprising young couple. In around the very beginning of the 1930s, probably 1930, they traveled to Paris. And there, so Kimport is actually a derivation from their family name, which is McKim. So they traveled to Paris and the Paris Colonial exhibition. And they brought their two daughters with them. And at that exhibition, there were some dolls exhibited in beautiful costumes, in lace and in beautiful cotton prints and fabrics. And the girls, the two daughters of the McKim family, McKim couple, was so enamored, so in love with these dolls that gave the parents an idea to start selling ethnic collectible dolls in Independence, Missouri. And they began to put this idea into practice. So they would attend expositions and exhibitions and folk art fairs throughout the country, traveled abroad, and began to get in touch with artisans across Europe and in the United States to seek out these collectible dolls in ethnic dress. The market was only collectibles. They never sold, or probably a few, but with these ethnic dolls, they targeted collectors. So one mystery, one enigmatic thing remains for me here. So how did they get in touch with Artels? So what's the connection here? This is still a piece of mystery to me. How did they even come up with this idea to start selling dolls from the Soviet Union? The diplomatic relations between the United States and the Soviet Union were established only in 1933. So if they traveled to Paris in the early 1930s, and that was already, so when the depression or the effects of the Great Depression was still very strong. So that would be what, 1930, 31. And the diplomatic relations established in 1933. So they had to be fairly fast in finding a way to get these dolls from the Soviet Union. And so they were the first in that market. Kind of similar to our museum founder, who began to collect Soviet era art starting from the early 90s. And as we remember, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. He was the first there to start collecting Soviet era art. And Ray Johnson, by the late 1930s, had the best and biggest collection of Russian 20th century art across the world. So a kind of similar thing happened here with import dolls on a smaller scale, but still they were that link, that connection between the 1930s Soviet Union, Soviet doll producers, and American collectors. The dolls that the Kimport, the McKim family sold were mostly sold through mail order. They had catalogs. One of them was called Doll Talk. And we can see 2 pages from this catalog here. You can see actually the prices for these dolls, which was quite for the 1930s. One of the dolls was $10. That was very expensive. But if you look at this nesting doll, and nesting dolls, of course, are in a way, they were a lot more widespread. So the buying opportunities were a lot greater, a lot easier to buy these nesting dolls. They've been produced, or they were produced by many regional centers already in the 1930s. Not many, but quite a few. While the Stockinette dolls, I believe their production started in the 20s and ended in the late 30s by the time the war started, 1941, the Second World War. And probably were produced a little bit in the 1940s, but I don't believe so. Because in the 1940s, the Kimports, this company in Independence, Missouri, began to focus on American dolls made in America because of all the difficulties of bringing these dolls from Europe. So you can see here a label, and quite a lot of the dolls that we have on view have these little labels. Sometimes you don't see Kimport dolls, just the label with the typed words made in the Soviet Union or made in Russia. But this is their original label. And here I put So just let's look at this catalog before we go to the next slide. So the Kimport company was a family-owned business. So the wife, Ruby McKim, was an artist, and she painted, or she drew these images, these illustrations for their catalogs herself. Really, it was a family business in the true sense of the word. It was a do-it-yourself thing. So everything was done by them, I believe. I'm sure they hired some people, but a lot of key things for the company were created and were organized and were made and were accomplished by the McKim couple. So Ruby McKim actually created these illustrations and these pictures. So later, then it began to publish a different catalog. It was called Foreign Folk Dolls. You see Kimport Dolls, Independence, Missouri. That's where these dolls come from. And also I put this short label that doesn't quite concern, it concerns the dolls that we are exhibiting here. Here, the McKim couple explains why they have to, it's the label from the period of the Second World War. And here they explain why they have to switch to local dolls. And that's what they write. To the barriers of distance, strange languages, money exchange, and tariffs has been added the specter of war. Many of our doll makers are shouldering arms or gone completely. Even when possible to get European dolls, prices are up due to war risks, insurance, and unusual shipping routes. That's why the company switched to American dolls, produced in America, including Native American dolls. They sold and collected and sold quite a lot of those. So these dolls were sold for foreign currency, for dollars, for francs, for pounds, English pounds. And there are very few found in Russia now. And Russian collectors have just started to discover them recently, in the last two decades, or in the last decade, because during the Soviet times, of course, the people-to-people connections between our countries, between Russia and the United States, were not great. There were not a lot of publications. It was the time of the Iron Curtain. And now people who are interested in collecting dolls or toys or making toys, artisans, are beginning to discover these Russian Artel dolls. And here you can see the artist or the craftswoman, Vera Ribrova, who lives in the Belgorod region, south of Moscow, in the town of Staraya Skol, quite a small town. And you see the photograph is quite recent. She's wearing a mask. And here in this online presentation, she's talking about these Artel dolls, how she discovered them, that there are literally, you can count the dolls that you can find in Russia, these dolls, by the palms of your hands. So there are literally probably several dozen that can be found in Russia nowadays. And she's beginning to, she's not just collecting, she's beginning to revive the craft. You see here, you can see some of the dolls that she made. So it's quite amazing to me how the craft of Artel dolls is experiencing a comeback, is returning to Russia now through entirely this effort and interest and passion of these individual collectors and craftsmen. So I believe collectors are really the backbone of the art world throughout centuries. If it was not for private collectors, we would not have museums. All museums initially were private collections. Of course, it was mostly kings and czars, but 19th century collectors began to preserve for us folk art and the art that was not considered an elite kind of art. And for this, I'm eternally grateful to our collectors and to the collector who contributed to this exhibition, which is Susan Johnson. I'm not sure she's with us today, but we will have this presentation online. And if she's not here, she will, I'm sure, will watch this presentation on through our museum website. She collected these dolls, even though she traveled to Russia quite often, but these dolls were collected here in the United States, because as we know now, there are very few in contemporary Russia. This Vera Rebrova is not the only person. The person that we see in this photograph is not the only person who is now collecting and trying to resurrect the craft of making these dolls. There is Olga Popova in Perm, and this is a town in the between the European and Asian part of Russia, east of Moscow. And also Yelena Elagina in Moscow, she has a collection. So not a lot of people, because these dolls are not really very available to collectors, but it's really a wonderful thing happening, that these dolls that are not just artworks, but they are provide a glimpse into Russian history, into the history of the relations between our countries, the United States and Russia. So they were made, produced for such a short period of time. What, a couple dozen years, probably, and then they were gone mostly. So really, really unique historical and cultural artifacts that we have in the museum. So the dolls were, let's now look at the dolls and talk about them. The dolls were produced of different sizes, and some of them were quite small. So the bigger dolls would cost like $10. So these were probably, these are smaller dolls. They are, I believe, what, 3 inches. And we have, so our collector has quite a lot of them. So we arranged these little dolls into a traditional Russian circle dance called horovod, quite a traditional Russian peasant entertainment in winter and in summer. So dancing and singing. Russia was indeed a very singing country. Hundreds and thousands of songs are still around from the Russian folklore. The Artel dolls were not just focusing on Russian costumes and presenting Russian regions. They also began to go into the wider Soviet Union, into the republics. And here you can see dolls from where not from, they were all made in Moscow in those few artels. Probably there were export dolls, red toys, everything for the child, red Army Artel. These dolls are dressed, and actually their faces are made to resemble the ethnic groups that live in what we call now the stans: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan. So here we see 2 Uzbek dolls, Tajik, and 2 Kyrgyz boys. These are smaller dolls, and this is a label. I will show you the doll. So the doll wearing this large fur hat, a Tajik. So this is the label that quite often you have to really search the dolls under their clothing, and the clothing is amazingly made with several layers. It's not just that you see an outer coat or an outer dress. There would be like, you know, an underskirt, or there would be some other things that these dolls wear under. So really the costumes are made in amazing detail, imitating the ethnic costumes of that period. And some of the dolls are were made wearing kind of, these dolls are kind of townsfolk. They were called the honeymoon couple or the newlyweds. Usually the Kimport publications like Dolls Talk would give names to their dolls. So they are just looking at one of their publications, I found that they were called the honeymoon dolls, these 2. So here we can see some of the dolls from Ryazan, a Moldovan doll to the right and the Ukrainian doll to the left. Again, some of them, you see, oh, these 2 have beads. And these wonderful dolls, look how much character they have. A wanderer or a traveler, a doll in a kind of a festive costume, a woman in a winter dress, winter clothing. And also I would like you to pay attention to the textiles, to the wonderful cotton prints that these dolls have and that these costumes are made of. So in our exhibition, we created little vignettes when we made our dolls interact with each other a little bit. And these 2 dolls, the wanderer, it's called a wanderer, a woman walking, probably going to a distant monastery for a pilgrimage, or going to another village to visit her relatives. And this woman here in our exhibition, they talk. The 2 dolls that are from the museum collection, you can see here. And they wear winter dress. These 2 dolls are really slightly different. They are not Stockinette dolls. And you see we put a little samovar in front of them, a samovar where tea was made to keep you warm during winter. So the dolls that we saw at the previous photo are placed next to this Russian peasant northern type house that we have on display. And I would like to reveal another secret, I would say, about this exhibition, that this house is actually a doll house. If you look, so these are the 2, a little composition of a woman who is walking from village to village, and that doll arranged or set up as a conversation, as a dialogue between them. These wonderful dolls. So the house that's on display is actually a house with the interior furniture, interior decorations. And I would like you to have a quick glimpse into what's inside that house. We didn't show this house as open for the simple reason that that exhibition is about Artel dolls. when we have an exhibition about Russian wooden architecture or about Russian peasant lifestyles and way of life, or about the Russian North, we will show that house inside. But meanwhile, you can enjoy looking at this house. It's interesting that this house was made here in the United States, apparently commissioned by a Russian emigre who provided the designs and the layouts, because this house is remarkably accurate in how all the rooms are set, what's inside the house. So here you can see, first of all, I should mention that it's a northern house. Only in the north, Russian peasants built these very large houses so that they could survive the winter, sometimes without going out much outside the house, except to get water and throw out trash. Oh, probably there was not a lot of trash at that time. Because everything they needed was inside the house. So the house had, so that's the view from the top. That's the first floor. There would be more bedrooms on the upstairs floor. So here you can see, that's the main entrance. We can see a woman bringing some water into the house. So where would she be bringing that water? Probably she might be walking into the dining area with a large stove, Russian stove. You see a person is sitting on that stove. These Russian stoves were so large that people could sleep on them, and I did. My parents' summer place had a large Russian stove. On a cold fall or spring night, I would just climb the stove and warm my bones on that, as it was said in Russian. And here is the room, which is the room for the guests. We can see the red corner with the icon and embroidered towel over the icon, a table, and another stove, a smaller one, just to keep the room warm. And so that's the icon corner is called the red corner. Or that woman with the bucket of 2 buckets of water on a traditional Russian yoke, that's how water was brought into houses, could go into a sauna. So there is a sauna in this house with the stove and the bucket where you pour water to heat it, and some benches and some tubs where you fill in and wash yourself. Or she could go into what is down below that we don't see on our photograph, is the stable and areas for the cattle and the chicken. So she might be bringing that water over there. And also there is a toilet here, a small toilet. So it's an amazing house. Let's look at some pictures, and we will be ready to take some questions in just half a minute. I would love you to see these images from that house. So the Russian stove, the woman bringing the water, the sauna, Russian banya. And with this, let me stop sharing my screen. And
great. Thank you, Masha. It was so hard for us to decide to cover up that dollhouse, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, but it was necessary. We wanted to focus on dolls. Otherwise,
absolutely,
a lot of attention would be drawn to.
It was the right decision, but you all got a sneak peek, which is wonderful. There was a question earlier about the costume, traditional costumes that the dolls are wearing. Can you speak to the era? You know, are they echoing the costumes of the time? Is this a historical look? Did it feel contemporary at the time? Can you give us more information on the sarafans and the things that they're wearing?
Yeah, these dolls wear historical costumes. Of course, they are simplified just for the reason of the sheer size of the dolls. You could not replicate traditional costumes in all detail because they had so much detail. So these are simplified, but yeah, they show they follow the traditions of the village attire at that time. And in the 1920s, people still wore, that was before mass-produced clothing, right? 1920s, people still made a lot of clothing themselves, and especially in the villages. So in the 20s, and that was before the collectivization, when women were no longer able to stay at home and just do what they had been doing for centuries, and including producing clothing for the entire family. So when these dolls were made, 1930s, and looking back into the 1920s, yeah, traditional costumes were in the villages were still very much around.
I think that's interesting about the exhibition where you're exploring, there's a large map in this exhibition as well to illustrate the far reaches of the ethnic groups and the vast area that is the Soviet Union. And there's also some descriptions of different textiles from different regions, which would be reflected in those costumes, correct?
Yeah, well,
the general overview.
Textiles were contemporary, bought by the artisans who made these dolls in Moscow. And at that time, that's why you see a lot of kind of contemporary designs from the 1930s in these fabrics. Some of them look traditional, but some of them look, you know, there are these geometrical designs. So they remind me of the explosion of avant-garde designs in Soviet textile factories in the 1930s, when some avant-garde artists, women artists, began to work for Moscow textile factories, creating designs for the fabrics.
So there's a question here about the dolls' heads and faces, and those are the question is, are they all made of fabric?
Yes.
Yeah, that's part of the stockinette, isn't it?
Yeah, they're all made of fabric except for the two dolls.
The winter ones, right?
In winter dress. And these were recently donated, actually shortly before the exhibition, by Lynn Peterson. And this gift was made by Mark and Lynn Peterson in the loving memory of their parents, doctors Janet and Donald Peterson, I believe the right pronunciation. And so I would like to thank Lynn for this wonderful donation that was just on time. I think the dolls arrived to the museum when we were already beginning to install the show. So very timely.
Magical things sometimes happen, don't they?
Absolutely. And these two dolls gave us a chance to show Russian dolls in winter, in winter dress and winter clothing. Those dolls are not stockinette, not fabric, but all the other dolls, yes.
And most of these, with those two winter dolls are the exception, but all of the dolls from Susan Johnson's collection?
Yes.
Do you recall how many she has in her collection? Like you chose from a significant body, didn't you?
I would say about 50 stockinette dolls. Actually, there is one doll, a stockinette doll, a fabric doll that comes from our collection also. But Susan has the exact same doll, and that was arrived to the museum as part of the loan of these dolls. We just decided to spare some of Susan's dolls because every exhibition it's a lot of strain, a lot of stress for an artwork. So for me, you know, these things, these objects are living things. So I decided to spare, to give a break and give some rest to her doll and put our museum doll on display instead. It's one of the Moldovan dolls. That's another little secret about this exhibition.
Oh, how did you, go about choosing from 50 dolls to create the vignettes that you created for this exhibition?
You know, it was easy because I mostly did not include the duplicates that looked similar. And I just tried to work with the collection as it was. So I just, because it's so wonderful and so rare, in fact. As I mentioned, these dolls were produced for a very short period of time.
Just looking at this question here. The meager workshop photo showing a sewing machine reminds me of the importance of the sewing machine in the movie Yentl. How did the dolls made in the homes get to be gathered for export? Do you know the answer to that, Masha?
How they were?
How did the dolls made in the homes get to be gathered for export?
Well, these dolls were made in, so the exhibition is called Artel.
Yeah, these were made in Artels.
Yeah, so Artels were cooperatives. Remember I showed you a few photographs, just, you know, a small group of people around the table making things. And sometimes they would just probably rent space. It is possible that they got together in homes, but it's homes were in Moscow at that time, apartments were not large. So most likely they would have, they would have some kind of an umbrella organization that would give them some space to work in. And they worked, it was already Soviet time. So all industrial production was heavily controlled by the government. So the prices were set by the government, where to sell. So the prices, especially foreign trade, was of course in the hands of the government. And these Artel who made these dolls were, especially at that time, were very interested in selling these dolls abroad because that just gave more money. That's very simple. So they worked with the government officials to sell the dolls they made.
I think I'm glad that we could give a glimpse of this exhibition to everyone out there. I think if you have an opportunity to look at the exhibition, Masha and the team did a fantastic job of bringing these dolls together. And as she mentioned during the presentation, that it's magical almost how their little faces and their bodies, when they're facing each other, actually look like they're in conversation, that they're relating to each other. They don't look like static entities, do they?
Yeah, and there is much to say in favor of fabric dolls, Stockinette dolls, because, for centuries or probably for thousands of years, a lot of dolls were made from soft materials because they are so much more soft and alive in a sense than dolls made from porcelain or from plastic. So they absorb light differently. They're made from fabric.
If this room was filled with porcelain dolls, this would be a completely different feeling for an exhibition. Completely.
Yeah.
It's very warm and welcoming. Remind me, how many dolls are in this show?
About 45.
Yeah.
That's an approximate number. Yeah. And there are a lot. This vitrine, the case with small dolls, has about a dozen of them. Just one.
The party one.
Yeah, the dancing group.
Yes. Well, with that, I think we've gotten to our time, and I think we've gotten through all of our questions. I Thank you so much, Masha. And if you get a chance to see this exhibition, it is up through August 8th. So it's going to be in the museum all summer long, which is great news. And we're always posting photos of the vignettes. I wouldn't say always, but we will be continually posting photos of the vignettes for social media and whatnot. So feel free to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter if you want to just keep seeing photos if you're not able to come to the museum. Otherwise, do you have any final comments about Artel dolls or anything else you'd like to say to our audience today, Masha?
I would like to encourage everyone to see this exhibition in person, because I firmly believe that museums are about actual viewing experience and experiencing a three-dimensional artwork in space, looking at how the light is reflected and just feeling the aura of that historical thing, which is the screen or the publication, the print will never be able to reproduce that feeling and that experience of actually relating to an object, because it kind of absorbs you. You begin to think about the life of that object, what it went through, where it came from, even subconsciously. You don't probably always put it into the distinct thoughts, but you respond with your whole body because it's a bodily experience. That's what museums are about.
Absolutely. And there's
yeah, I thank everyone who attends, is attending, and also thank our collectors, Susan Johnson and Lynn Peterson, her parents, and also the museum staff, Michelle Massey, who is my wonderful colleague. Great to work with her, and we've done many virtual tours, and because it's so easy for us, two of us, to work together, we are going to do a lot more.
We are. We actually really enjoy doing this.
Yeah.
We're sitting in our offices next door to each other, and we just have so much fun doing this, and we'll keep doing it for all the exhibitions coming up, no matter how the world opens up. I think this is a really important aspect of outreach. You are welcome to support the museum in a number of ways. We're happy to give these virtual tours for free to all of you. And we will post this tour along with all the other tours on our website. If you're interested in supporting the museum, you can become a member, which will give you free exhibition entrances and all sorts of other benefits that you can find on our website. We are also in the midst of a Spring Forward MN, which is an initiative by Give MN. So there's a fundraising period until the 11th of May, and we are getting really close to reaching our match challenge. We have a $5,000 match challenge, and I know we're getting close. So if you donate right now, which you can do through our website, or you can call us, or you can send it via email or mail, excuse me. And then your giving has double the impact. So we appreciate any support that you can give. We're lucky to be around and still kicking even after all of the challenges of this last year. And we're happy to be able to offer all kinds of programming and to just keep adapting and keep bringing the wonderful works to all of you. So.
Yeah. And with that, Michelle, just one last word. Let's thank our director,
we should,
Meister, who kept us going and moving forward, and really contributing a lot of his talents to the museum's survival in these difficult times. And we are, thanks to him, we're not just surviving, but we are prospering. Yeah. And also I would like to mention our installation team, Jeannie Tyson and Michael Waltz. And it was their work that made the actual installation possible. So,
yeah, it takes a village, and we are very lucky. We are all we are strong colleagues, right? We are very lucky to work here. So, with that, this is a great way to start our day. Thank you so much to all of you from all over the world that are viewing today. We'll post this on our website in the next couple of days. And until we see you again, be safe and be happy and be well. Thank you.